Well, welcome everyone again to the official part of.
So I think this is a good way to start off, and I really like it's not an ad, it's not a promotion, but I'm a huge fan of these two books, strategic content design by Erika Jorgensen and also the business of UX writing by Yael Ben David. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Sorry if not. So the first one is actually one of the, I think it's the newest, if not one of the newest books about content content research. And it offers a really great overview of content research method, but it also teaches you how to think strategically. And I feel like this is something we as UX writers are sometimes missing, because very often we are not even part of the discussion, right? And then it's really hard also for us to think strategically, think business, if we are never part of the discussion. So I think this is a really, really great book to look at, and it also offers very detailed examples about how to do content research. And the other one is The Business of UX Writing. What I think it's amazing book, because it's about ROI. So I think it's quite hard depending on what data we have access to. It's just sometimes really hard, for us to say exactly, if we do X, Y with the content, we can save X amount of money and stuff like that. And I also think it's, even though sometimes a lot of those things are not even possible to do, depending on the company you work for, it still teaches you how to think strategically, and it shows you the ways you probably don't even think of. So I think it's a nice way to start with. The second one is think strategy. And what I mean by that, I feel like, maybe it's my personal experience, but I feel like sometimes when we advocate for UX writing, or when we advocate for content research, we get lost a bit, and we forget about this big picture of what are our company's goals, where are the new stuff that we are working on, what are the new features, what are the releases, what is the impact, where can we make the biggest impact with our words. And I think this is really important for you when you go and when you have to advocate and we have to fight for content research or for UX writing, really think about what is relevant now for my company, what is the team working on. Because if you just go and start we start just talking about the general impact of UX writing, and it's not relevant at the moment, people will be like, yeah, it's nice to hear about that, but it's not really, we don't have time for that whatsoever. So really think strategically. And the next one I think is also really important, is to team up with your stakeholders and learn about their challenges. I think we talk to people, you should talk more to people, and we should really, find a team, and we should find the people who have similar challenges, and we should also understand their challenges, to actually have people who have our back, and, people to work together, because it should be team sport. And the next one is educating others, which I also think is very important. Share your knowledge, but also don't be smarty pants. Share it in a digestible and friendly way, and don't do, because I feel like sometimes we're like, yeah, but we never did content research. We just did, usability testing. Just find a way, how to share your knowledge in a very digestible way, in a way that is relevant for your company now. And I think that's, that's already half of the story. And set priorities. You can't test everything. And very often we can test very few things. So there is a really great article on by Nielsen Norman Group, which really, I think it was a video or article, doesn't really matter, but it's a really great way to, that shows you how to think about the content that matters, about, new releases, features, and stuff like that. So yeah, set priorities and identify important content. This is also something when, especially you feel like you have to advocate for content research every time. identify important content, and that can be, again, that depends on your goals. Like maybe that's content that, you know, appears everywhere and it's really crucial for your customers to understand. So you really need to know what content is important. There is also a lot of how to do that in the book by Erika Jorgensen. This one is a big one. Look for help, because I sometimes feel like there is so much data and so much insights already available, but just because we don't have access to those data, to those things, it's just like, you know, and because we sometimes are not in, like very often we are not involved in all of those discussions, we are not even aware of everything that is available. So really try to talk to your salespeople, to your support people. Maybe you can just, you know, listen in, and or maybe you can get access to your ticketing system, and you could just really go through tickets. And at least, for example, you're working on a feature and you know, like there is, you know, you want to, I don't know, increase the conversions, or you will have, you know, a goal for things. Just go and see, try to get this access and try to find for tickets maybe where, you know, people are referring to a certain issue they had, because you can read and you can get so much insight from those things. And I feel like sometimes we just don't do that. And then also maybe there are surveys, maybe you have a customer satisfaction feedback you can look into, or any other analytics dashboards, wherever, like, you know, you could just try to get access to those things. And one thing is also probably, let's say you work on a new feature, or you're changing something, or it doesn't really matter, but like just, you know, that, you know, people will be getting in contact with your sales team or your support team. What you could do, you could make it easy for your salespeople or support team or other stakeholders to share customer feedback, because I feel like sometimes, you know, salespeople have this feedback on their mind, but they're like, oh, they don't have time or whatsoever. So this feedback stays in their head, right? And so create a channel if you have I don't know, if you have any internal chat tools, or create a document or something where they can just literally, you know, add their feedback. And why you need that? Because, for example, let's say you are working on a new feature and you see that there are, I don't know, 5 customers always asking the same question, even though you probably don't have an opportunity, you know, to do content research. Like this is already an indication there is something wrong with that probably piece of content. So it's super helpful, and you can do really a lot more than you think. And this one is, this one is just really stay realistic and don't test what you cannot implement. And sometimes it's very tempting, but just stay realistic. Okay, let's get to getting stakeholders buy-in. I think we all have heard one of these sentences at least once. We know our users, we don't have time, we don't need to do testing, or we already do usability testing. And then, you know, people don't understand, you know, what the difference is between usability testing and content research and stuff like that. And the last one is, what I wanted to mention is what happened actually to me. Maybe I don't know what content research is. So we had, like, you know, a discussion with our team, like we had a lot of different discussions regarding, you know, usability testing and research, like in general. And then I know that I've tried to advocate, like, you know, for content research and, like, you know, also getting emotional, which is normal in a way. But then someone on the team said, like, okay, but then I maybe don't know what content research is. And I was like, it hit me. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is the thing, you know, it felt to me like I've been talking to a wall, but it's like, you know, just because maybe someone, you know, and I was really lucky that the person said, like, maybe I don't know what content research is. And then I started looking into it, you know, and digging deeper and thinking about, okay, if, like, you know, would it help if I prepare, you know, an overview of the possible content research methods and how I go about it, like, you know, and stuff like that. So really listen and try to understand why, like, you know, why you get pushback, why company doesn't find time or doesn't prioritize content research. Really listen and talk to people. Okay, so how to get stakeholders buy-in. And I really mean it. Set yourself up for success. Don't make your life harder. Just really think about anything that could help you to actually get your stakeholders buy-in. And that's something I mentioned before: relevance, business goals, and impact. You really have to think about the project, like an ongoing projects, or relevant projects or features or tasks your team is working on. And you really have to think about the business goals and where you can make the most impact with UX writing. Because otherwise, if you just stay very general, no one's gonna, most people are not going to listen to you. So really think about what are the business goals. Like if we are trying to, I don't know, increase the conversion rate or whatever you're trying to do, just really think, what is the most crucial thing the company is working now? Make it a team sport. I also mentioned it a bit before. I think this is also really important. And do not disappear. Like if you, let's say, you also get the chance maybe to, you got the yes, you got the green light, and don't disappear. Like talk to people and make it a team sport, and find people who will have your back, and find people to work on those stuff together. Because at the end of the day, if, I don't know, 3 people will advocate for the same thing, it's already way more power than if you do it alone. And if you got pushback, understand why. And this is really, really important, because sometimes people, depending on, people's drivers, motivations, people have sometimes, we don't even know, I don't know, let's say there is a stakeholder who has this power to decide if you get the budget, or if you get the green light for content research. And those people, they have KPIs, they have numbers, they are measured on and stuff like that. And if you don't know what drives them, if you don't know their challenges, it will be really hard for you to actually get the yes. Because you just, the way, and it's not because you're, the information or the arguments you are bringing to the table that they are not, that they are wrong. It's just, it's not how the mind of this person works. If you have a numbers person and you get very emotional, and it's probably the chance that you will get a pushback, it's really high. So you really have to think about, okay, who is the stakeholder? Who is the person I'm talking to? What drives them? If they need numbers, and if you don't have internal numbers, use there is just so much stuff out there you can use, real example by other companies. And sometimes also showing the value, or showing the impact is really hard. But you can also speak to for example, to your support team, because if you talk to them and they say hey, we get I don't know, X amount of numbers every week, and it costs us so much and so much time, and this is also something, it's a bit trickier to say exactly how much money you can save the company, but it's possible. So really try anything you could. All right, then oops, echo. Find the right people and speak their language. It goes into a similar direction what I mentioned actually before, but it's also you need to know who is actually able to decide. And so you really need to find those people, and you need to speak their language. It's really important. And show, don't tell, and relevant examples. It's also maybe something, let's say, okay, you got someone is yeah, okay, tell me more about content research, what it is, how do you want to do it? Because sometimes I feel we think that people have the same, or when we talk about things, we feel oh, people know what we are talking about, but very often it's not the case. So when you have someone saying, okay, tell me more about it, and show people real examples, show examples that are relevant. Again, think about the actual the relevant projects your team is working on. Think about that stuff and show relevant examples. Look, if we ask those questions in this area, we can we could find out why people don't convert or whatsoever. Just really think about real examples. And sometimes also if you get deeper, I found it also very helpful, not only for the stakeholders, but also for myself to explain and understand the why behind every question you ask. And sometimes it also helped me to validate, like, for example, I write down a task, or I write down a question I want to ask to test participants, and then I'm like writing, okay, we are asking this question because we want to find out X, Y. And then when you write it down, you will sometimes like, nah, is this question really getting me the answers I need? And it's a good way to help people understand why you're asking certain questions, but then also help you validate that you are asking right questions. And the last one, if you have any chance to maybe invite someone, I don't know, maybe you have a colleague or someone who's doing the same job, invite people, because sometimes people need to hear it from someone else. Sometimes people need to hear it from the outside of your company. They need to see, I don't know, case studies or stuff, other people did, just to hear that you are not the only one who's, trying to get to have a, yes for content research. So that might be also a really powerful tool. Okay, now we are going to talk about how to actually get behind the why. There's a pointer. So I mentioned it before. Step one is set yourself up for success. What does that mean? Before you even start, think about your goals. Focus on your goals and be really clear about what you want to learn, and really stick to that, because it's just so easy, when you get into like, oh, okay, we could ask that question, we could do that, and it's just so easy, to drift away. No, stick to your goal and know exactly what you want to find out. Documentation might be also depending on how you update your stakeholders, but like in general, I think it's really, really important to clearly document your goals, like all the data you have, your hypotheses, tools you're using, like test participants. Who are the people you are actually testing the content with? Who are the people you are not testing the content with, and why? Because sometimes it's like, it in your, like, because you talk to your team, and why you are now just, I don't know, maybe going to talk to a particular customer segment, but document that stuff, because then people, again, it will help people to understand, like, why you're doing what you're doing, and yeah, just maybe it's going to save you time, asking questions and stuff like that. Then also, if tasks and screening questions and interview questions, document all of that. Validating questions, that's something I touched upon before. Make sure that the questions you ask will get you answers you can actually use. Because I think, like, when I think back of how we were framing some questions, I rewrote them very often because I think I did not focus on the goal. And then I was like, okay, but depending on who you talk to and how people perceive, the question, you really need to make sure that you're not leading people, and that you're getting the information that will help you. And the last one is really important, and it's about giving enough context to your test participants, and also, creating realistic tasks. And it doesn't matter, like, if you do a moderated interview, if you send out a survey, like it just you need to provide enough context, be it screenshots, details, whatever. Just make sure that people know where they are and they understand, like, because otherwise it might affect the results. And keep asking why. Let's say you have a task-based research, and it's really important that you ask follow-up questions and keep asking why, like if it's, a live interview, to get the information you need, because otherwise it's just like, you may get, okay, people prefer I don't know, a certain word, but then you don't know why, and it's not really helpful, right? Cross-check findings if it's possible, then use other research methods, for example, A/B testing, to cross-check findings. For example, if you ask people what words they prefer, then if you have the chance, then double check it with A/B testing. And again, be realistic. Don't test what you cannot implement. Like maybe you're testing something, some feature names or something, like words that are not in line with your voice and tone, because you're saying like, yeah, but this would be like, this sounds so great. Don't do that, because if it's not in line with your voice and tone or with your brand values or whatsoever, you're not going to be able to implement it. So no need to test that. And then the last one is really important, the power of data. Know how to turn data into actionable improvements. And sometimes I feel like, for example, I'm not on numbers. It's just, it's just not my thing. And I feel like sometimes you can also ask for help, if you need to, synthesize data and you're not really good at, but it's just know how to turn data into actionable insights. It's really, really important, because otherwise you will get, information, but if you don't know what to do with that information, it's gonna get tricky. And also maybe something to mention, also in Erica's book, I think there were some really great ideas of how to synthesize, for example, scalar question results and stuff like that. So there is like really a lot of information also out there. And so yeah, just if you don't know how to do that, educate yourself and make sure you get the results you need. All right. Let's touch now on qualitative research methods. So the step two, is know what you want to learn. And so this, I actually, when I was creating the presentation, I was like, nah, I don't know, I really want to use all those, namings, and I'm not sure I want to actually talk about, is it a clarity? Is it a comprehension study? Like, is it close test? What is it? Because I feel like depending on your stakeholders, sometimes it helps, yeah, to use those words. And at some point you should, you should know what it is. But I want you, especially if you're starting off, I want you to concentrate on, to focus on what you want to learn. And it's, of course, it might help you, but it's just, it's better that you really understand what you want to learn. And then you ask, the right questions. Then you know all the research methods, but then at the end of the day, you don't know how to use them. So the naming for this method is from Erika Jorgensen's book, Strategic Content Design. So that's why I thought, okay, I'm gonna, add it to the overview, but don't stress about it. Like, if you don't know, and it's also sometimes not even helpful, because, for example, if you talk to some stakeholders and you're like, oh, okay, let's do this close test, and the person like has no clue what a close test is, or what is a comprehension study. Like, people have no clue, and they're like, no, I don't know what Jevgenija is trying to do, but like, I don't understand. And maybe sometimes they're not going to tell you that they don't know what you're talking about. So be really mindful about what words you're using. So know what you want to learn. Is it like, do people understand specific words, phrases, your value proposition? Why? Always ask why. Do they understand specific details? This also helps you to find out if there is maybe too much information on the page, or maybe there are some really important details missing on the page. Are people overwhelmed? Like, again, why? Oops. What words, phrases people use and prefer or not? Why? Because again, I mentioned it before. If you probably know, okay, this is the word people prefer, but then you don't really know why, so it's not really helpful. So always ask why. Can you use the same words for different audiences? How different audiences perceive those words. This is, for example, especially in our case, this is very important, because we have customers in Germany and we have customers in Switzerland. And I think people who, know the differences know what I'm talking about, but it could also be used like for, to find out if you can use the same wording for new customers, or you can use the same wording for like, super users. And it's also like, that's going to help you to find a way, to put your information in a way that both, target audiences can use. What words convey values or tone you aim for? Do people see your app as, I don't know, helpful, or like how your language, how your words make people feel? And again, why? And the last one is how likely are people to take a certain action, or why they don't click a certain button, and stuff like that. All right, now let's look at the e-signing use case, which is our use case. Like, it's a real example our team has been working on. So let's look at how people pick plans. I think this is a huge topic. And it's not just like, some of you might think, well, yeah, but that's maybe, that's a website. It's not really UX writing and stuff, but you usually have like plans overview page also within the product. Like, for example, also in our case, in most cases where you still have an overview of the plans and stuff like that. And so there is a lot you can do better. There is a lot to find out. There is a lot of information depending on your offering and stuff. And so, yeah, for us, it was what we wanted to know. We wanted to know why people pick certain plans, how people pick certain plans, and stuff like that. So what questions can you ask to get to get the information about how people actually pick plans and how they make decisions? So I will just walk you through some examples and then show you some more. So let's say something like, do you see a plan that might be right for your team? Or which plan would you choose? Or which plan would you not choose, and why? Can you tell me how the plans differ? Like, these are, depending on your goal, these are the things, you can ask, and it's just, it gives you, the information. It helps you understand how people, what people compare, like how people compare, how people make decisions. And it's not just like, oh, do you understand the difference between the plans? And then the person says like, yeah, I do. And then you just, it's not helpful. So really think about what you need to know, what you want to find out. Another example, explain in your own words what a seat is. It's like in our case, we have, this seats that people can get, and it's quite a complex system. And this one is really interesting because when I was reading the Erika Jorgensen's book, there was exactly example, because she used to work for Microsoft. And there was example why Microsoft speaks about licenses, and that was exactly, the discussion we had internal. I was like, why didn't I read the book before? So that was really interesting, because we feel like, yeah, everyone is using, like all the, if you, not all, but like many companies out there, like speak about seats and stuff. And we feel like, yeah, people actually understand that. No, you need to figure out if your audience understands it. All right. Then another way to go about it are, like, I think, depending again, like if you do moderated tests, if you use rapid user tests or any other tools, like always like giving people realistic tasks, it's very, very helpful. So this is also another example. Imagine you have a team of 5. 3 people are, like in our case, maybe a bit of context for you to understand. So it's about e-signing, and in our case, it's like how it works. You can sign documents yourself, but you can also invite other people to sign. So imagine you have a team of 5, 3 people are inviting others to sign, and 2 people only sign themselves. When you look at the page, or when you look at this information, how many seats would you get? Why? And you can like really, like, instead of just like asking like, oh, do you understand what a seat is, or like then the person would just say yes. And I'm going to show you some examples later why it's very dangerous to ask those kind of questions. So this one is also something, when you ask people to think out loud, you can really get so many details to understand, like if they really understand what what it is, because very often they say they do, but when you watch them doing stuff, you realize no, which is just how it is. Just in general about, you want to find out if some phrasing or some information is clear, like how people feel about it, you could ask, what do you think about this information? If you could change anything about it, what could it be? Why? As an example. And then you could also use, for example, scalar questions on a scale of 1 to 10, how important it is for you to know, for example, what features your plan comes with. And it's really important in this case to ask why, because then at the end of the day, okay, you probably, you have, the evaluation at the end, but you don't know why. So it's really important to always ask, like, why do you, why you need to know what features are in your plan, like, ask why, always ask why. So in our case, we conducted some moderated interviews using Google Meets, and here's just a very, very quick screenshot of just of some results, like, what we found out, like we wanted to know why people choose a certain plan, like, how they use seats and stuff. And it's really interesting because, sometimes it's just like, you just need to, it's just how, there is no ideal way that you test everything and only then it goes live. And it's just like, it's not how it works, right? And sometimes you just need to just put things live, and then they are very far away from perfect, and no one does it in a perfect way, but then, like, you're still trying to improve it step by step. In our case, for example, we didn't have like any tooltips, like anything, any information that was like, that might people help to understand, for example, what a seed is. And it's just interesting to see how, now they will also have maybe this information, and then we explain it more. There are still, if you look at this part over here, like these are like 4 customers. Like this one, I put yes, but well, he kind of understood what a seed is. This one, yes. But then there are 2 customers who still do not understand, what, like, who needs a seed? So yeah, and then you can also use this information, like, to know how improve the content of the page. Or for example, that people look for certain things when they choose certain plans, and maybe you hide that information, like, that information is like hidden on your page or somewhere, and then you need to think about, okay, how to make it visible. Or maybe, for example, like, in this case, we figure out that people, like, usually they know already from the beginning what plans they need. And it's not like, they just start a trial, and then they test stuff and then figure out on the way, like, what fits them best. It was like they knew from the beginning. And then when you have this price overview within the product, like, when people upgrade, for example, when they decide, okay, now we are choosing this app, and now, we need to upgrade and do stuff. And then you really, like, it gives you information about, okay, what information we actually need to show on that page, because there, like, maybe people don't even need to know anything about, like, features and stuff. They just want, to go through the checkout as quickly as possible and just know what they pay at the end of the day and stuff like that. Because maybe, again, they knew already from the beginning what they needed, they tested it, and they just need to do an upgrade check. And so yeah, then we also did some testing using rapid user tests, and it was really interesting when I was watching, the recording. So there was sorry, it's in German, but that's fine, I think. We had, like, there was a task, like a task description, like a scenario, what you're trying to do, and then people were asked to think out loud, to click through the page and, like, do complete the tasks and share what they think, and it was really interesting because when you watch those recordings, it's like, oh, they understand, like, everything, it's like, yeah, I would, pick this plan, and it sounds like it makes sense, and then they, say something like, yeah, it's a good wording, or it's easy to understand, and then you ask follow-up questions, like, explain, I don't know, how you understand, some specific words or phrases and stuff. And when you start reading, what they actually write, you just realize, like, most of them actually did not understand it. So it's really, really important that you ask those follow-up questions, that you ask the right follow-up questions. and also that you are really careful and you really critically look at the insights you get, you know, because very often people will just say something, but then you watch them doing, or like, you know, you ask follow-up questions and you just realize, okay, this is just, you know, this is not, it's just not, yeah, it's not really true. So that's really important. All right. So that was like, you know, one detailed example. Then you could do like, you know, you could ask those questions, like, again, depending on your goal. And I'm just gonna, I just want, you know, to walk you through some questions to ask, for example, to find out what people understand and expect. And again, it's just like, you know, it's not this is the only way, you know, to do it. Maybe it's not gonna, you know, work for you because you have, you know, different goals. So really think about what makes sense for you. But I still hope that, you know, it's also kind of an inspiration and yeah. So let's say you want to understand, as I said before, what people understand or what they expect. So for example, if we go back to the plants, then you could ask like which plant fits small teams of 10, and then you could ask why you think this is the right plant for those kind of teams. Then in our case, this is also very interesting. We have, like in e-signing, you have these 3 different e-signature standards. And we use, sometimes we use abbreviations for those standards. And it's really interesting because there is often this assumption within the company that, like, you know, yeah, like, you know, how the journey looks like. And if people are looking into, you know, what kind of e-signing service or provider they want to use, they should know, you know, the basic vocabulary. No, this is not the case, not always the case. So also be very mindful about stuff like that. And then you could also ask, for example, in this case, like, what do you think? It's simple, advanced, and qualified electronic signature. What do you think those things are? And then it's, yeah, it's really interesting to hear what people have to say about it. Or for example, you have like different, you know, features. And instead of just asking like, oh, do you understand how this feature works? Or like, you know, asking leading questions, like, do you understand this X, Y is going to happen? No. It would be better to say something like, how would you explain, for example, in our case, the signature reminders to your colleagues or something like that. And then you know, you can get a lot of insights out of those answers. And again, it could be also, you know, written form. This is also another feature we have, like, would you add an observer when you invite someone to sign? Why? This is something that very often, like, people use one feature that they, yeah, maybe because they don't really understand how it works, because we didn't explain it in the right way, and they just use something that is actually they should not be using. So yeah, this is another way how to find out if they understand it or not. Or for example, what do you expect to happen when you click on, I don't know, get started, compare plans, whatsoever, and why? Yeah, so then you can also get a bit deeper. Like, again, if you are testing some specific features, you could ask, for example, tell me if you're talking to admins, tell me how your team will know that their documents are deleted after 5 days when you set the deletion period for them. In our case, there is this, you know, deletion period feature we call internally. And admins can just, you know, say, okay, all the documents are deleted after X amount of days. Why do you think you need to check your identity? That's also something, a very important step that, you know, takes place in our case. And yeah, it's just, you could just, instead of, you know, explaining people that you need to check your identity, you know, to sign with the highest standard, signature standard, whatsoever, you could just ask, like, why do you think you need to do that? Or for example, list out words you don't understand and list out words that make you feel in a certain way. Or let's say you want to verify maybe some, I don't know, brand values or some, like, I don't know, tone and voice and stuff like that. You could ask people, you know, to list out those words that make them feel in a certain way. Or you could also ask them to fill in the blanks with the words they think fit best. For example, to do something with a document, you need to do something with your identity, and then see what comes back. Yeah, or for example, what do you expect the next step to be? Then the last one, it's really interesting to know what words people use and prefer. And this is also something you can get a lot, like, you know, if you don't have the chance to talk to people or send service or whatever, like you can really get a lot of insights about those kind of things from the tickets. I also read a lot of support tickets we had, like, you know, to just see, for example, even if we use certain phrasing, like, you know, do people use the same phrasing when they write back, like, you know, what happens, what kind of phrasing they use and stuff like that. So you could also use that. If you have the chance to send out service or talk to people, for example, you could ask which call to action would you rather click to compare all the plans, why, or how would you name different signature types, like simple, advanced, and qualified electronic signature, why. Which of the words you prefer to name those different e-signatures and stuff like that. Or also, for example, which verb on the list do you prefer to describe the process of checking your identity? And again, it's maybe very specific, and it might be a bit hard for you, like, because you're maybe too far away from e-signing, but it's just like, you know, to show you like real examples that, yeah, for our use case. And this one is really great way to actually validate your word list and your style guides, because then it's like, you know, I think like most of us will have some kind of glossaries and style guides and stuff like that, and we sometimes, you know, decide to use certain words, but we don't really have, like, you know, how do we validate if those words are actually the right ones? And I think this is like the really great way to, like, say, you know, it also makes us customer centric, right? Because we know at the end of the day, it's just not just we decided, okay, these words are better because, you know, whatever reason, but then it's also a good way to, you know, we validated, we know that these are the words that people prefer. Just be very careful. Don't use it maybe as an argument to get stakeholders buy-in, because if you're like, hey, I want to validate, you know, my glossary, or I want to validate my style guide, might not work. So yeah, but it's a good way to do that. I think it's one of the last slides. Yes. So you could you could repeat, and you could do the same stuff for the tone of voice, and again, like about different topics depending on your goal. And I really hope that, you know, this is something, you know, that just helps you to think, you know, about, okay, what can we do? What kind of questions can we ask depending on, you know, what we, you know, want to find out, what we need to find out. So I really hope you can learn something from that. And I wanted to end on this note: an intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. I really think that, you know, so many people out there do not really understand what UX writers do, and, you know, and how, you know, how hard it is, like, you know, sometimes, and, like, you know, how we try to, you know, simplify stuff, and I think no matter how good you are, there will be moments where you're like, you know, when you're questioning stuff, when you know, you have this imposter syndrome, and you feel like, you know, you're not good enough, or, like, you know. And I just really hope that you can remind yourself, just like I do it, you know, for myself, that you are good enough, and you're doing your best with, you know, with all the tools you have at the moment. And it's always easy for other people, you know, to criticize something, but yeah, I think it's important to remind it, you know, to remind ourselves, and just learn on the way, and try to do things better and become better every day. Yeah, so this is it. Thank you so much for your attention, and for taking the time to join today. And then I think I hand it over to Fiona.
Thank you so much. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was very insightful, and it went very deep into one topic, which is really nice to see in this round. So thank you so much for all of your insights and all of your experience to kind of bringing that all together in one presentation. Thanks.
Thank you for
So now we have our Q&A session. I encourage you all to really just throw in any questions, even if they are very specific to your own, situation at the moment. Feel free to just throw them into the chat, and then I'll ask them directly to you, Jevgenija. Exactly. We already have a couple, so I'll start with those questions, and then we can see how far we get with all the questions that are lined up. All right, so in the very beginning, we did have a question. This was before you started your talk, but maybe you can summarize it in like a sentence or something. Like, how do you define content research? If you had to define content research, how would you define that?
I think there are so many definitions out there, and I think there is no right or wrong way to to define it, because at the end of the day, if you test it, like, if you do guerrilla testing, like if you just go on the street and you find, the right people to ask the right questions, and you get the information that helps you to to meet your business goals or whatever, then it is already content, it is already content research, and there is no right or wrong way, how to do it. And I think just everything you do to understand better, like, why people do certain things and how they perceive your language, how they understand or not, or like, I think everything you do to find out that is content research.
So follow-up question, like, what is a provocative question? What is the difference per se? Like, what is the difference between content testing and just regular usability testing? Like, you did go into like specific questions, right? But is there per se like a difference, or is it the same method, but kind of just from a different perspective?
I think it depends also how you do it, like how you do usability testing. But I feel like it's very often like, in usability testing it's about, okay, did people find the information? Yeah, they found it, yay. But then, at the end of the day, they found the information, but how do they, how do they interact with that information? Like, do they understand the information? What do they do? And I think this is a huge difference, because you can also do usability testing, like, and squeeze in some, content questions and stuff. But like, very often I feel like, it's from my experience, again, it's just like, oh, okay, of course you get some insights, but you don't ask specific questions about content in a way, just like, not that, oh, do you understand the content? But like I showed before, you ask very specific questions. And I feel like very often we are like, when we do usability testing, we are often happy, knowing that, oh, people found the information. But at the end of the day, it's not always very helpful, right? Because you don't know what they do with that information, if it's helpful, like, yeah, I think that is for me like the biggest difference.
So in other words, we go a bit deeper with content testing, like in understanding not just that our users found the information, but they found the correct information and they understood it and what they take from it. So maybe it's more of a psychological, maybe a perspective on our users' behavioral, yeah.
Yeah, and also understanding, like, going also deeper and understanding, like, okay, they are now on the screen, like, again, like, how do they feel about the content? Like, do they actually maybe decide to leave and not use the app because of the words, like, because the content makes them feel a certain way, or, they don't understand stuff. Like, this goes like really, really like way deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. I have another question here that is like definition based. So I'm just going to throw that at you again for the start. Jessica asked, basically it was Caddy, I think. Research and testing, like those are two different words, right? Is there a difference in what that means within the sphere of UX writing and content design? Research and testing, those two words, is there a difference? If so, what?
I might get some how to say, I think some people might not really agree with me. There is a difference, but I think, I'm just not a huge fan of like, those things like, okay, this is like, the definition of this is, the research, and this is the testing, and this is like how you frame it, because it also depends on like, some people use that kind of definitions, and other definitions work better for other people. I think it's just like, also when you read the articles, like you have like both things. So I would not really like, I just do not, like, as I said before, also with the content research methods, I just do not really, I think it's more important that you do the right thing for your company, and that you really do what you need to do. And if it's, if you want to call it at the end of the day content testing, if you want to call it at the end of the day content research, it's up to you.
Maybe the wording doesn't matter. It's more the content that matters.
I can imagine that there are people like, who have very, very strong opinion about that. This is my opinion, and this is like, I stand to my opinion. So yeah, I would just not
Absolutely
out about it. Yeah.
So you spoke about like you also just mentioned this in your answer right now. You spoke about, doing what's best for your company, right? And I feel like sometimes it's not easy to get like a seat at the table to like know what the company strategy is, to know like what their long-term or even short-term, goals, priorities maybe are, or maybe you do, and it's hard to break them down to help you in deciding how to bring content testing forward. So a question to you: how do you navigate this difficulty, this challenge of, thinking about company strategy before going into research, but maybe not being a key player on the strategy table, basically?
Yeah, I think it is a really like, it is a really, yeah, it is a topic that, it's really hard. Like, I have to be honest to you, like, it's so hard sometimes. And it also depends so much on your stakeholders. I want to believe that, that every one of us will sometimes like, find this one person that totally gets us, and that they can also advocate for us. And I think that helps a lot. Like, if you have someone who really understands that, if you have, I don't know, someone maybe on the C-level, and like those people understand, the value of content. So maybe you should really talk to those people, because it's like, it's the reality. Because sometimes it's like, we can talk to, I don't know, to our teammates, and then they're like, I don't really like, be the collaboration with designers or product managers, it doesn't really matter. But there just will sometimes be people like, who will just say like, this is the way I work, and I'm not going to change that. Like, until maybe, if my boss tells me to change the way I work, or, to change how we go about things, then I might look at it, And I also had a very interesting discussion. I remember when I was doing the UX writing course at the Berg School of Communications with Jane Rufino, which I absolutely loved. And I got really lucky because, like, we were in these different teams, and we got this group assignments, and got to work on this group assignment. And it was really interesting because in my group, there was a fantastic woman, Alex, who is a designer, and then she became a design lead, and she wanted to transfer into UX writing. And I remember we had this project, working on like, how do we advocate for content, like, for research, for content and stuff like that. And it was just like, it hit me just so hard, because she was like, Jevgenija, I feel you. Like, I know exactly what you're thinking, but like, those arguments, they're not gonna work for me. Like, because it's just not, like, I cannot go to my managers and say like, oh, Jevgenija wants to do, I don't know, X, Y, and that's why I'm saying there is no one size fits it all. You really need to find someone, because also in my case, like, I have to be also very honest, like, we had a lot of very uncomfortable discussions, where you also probably sometimes like question like, okay, how far should I go? Because sometimes it can get like, you can get into this conflict situation, and it's like, it can be very intimidating and very overwhelming. But I think like, if you try everything, like, if you really try everything, at the end of the, like, and nothing works, at the end of the day, you also have to think about, can you still learn? Like, maybe what is like, what can you take with you? And like, if you feel like, okay, you've tried everything, you've changed your communication ways, then you probably need to just find a different company. Like honest, like, and I'm serious, I'm like really serious, because at the end of the day, you also have to think about, if you spend years with the company and you cannot you cannot work on your skills, like you cannot develop your skills, then it's maybe also time to get out of your comfort zone and say like, hey, okay, but like, this is not taking me anywhere.
I think that's very wise advice. And I really like the tip, like find an ally, find, someone who supports your cause or kind of maybe speaks your language as well, and kind of start there, right? I think that's
because sometimes it's also, sometimes it's just like, especially if you are like the team of one, like myself, if you are like fighting for stuff, it's like I felt like sometimes like, am I like an alien, or like, do I like really like, do I go nuts? Like, is it only me? But it's not the case. And I feel like sometimes if you find that one person, like, then there are already two of us, and it's just sometimes so helpful, because it's eye-opening also to other people. And also when I read the book of, Erica's book, I was like, oh my God, I'm not like, sorry for using the word, but I'm not crazy. Like, and that happened.
That's also what this community is for, right? Sticking together on these topics and figuring out how to navigate the challenges.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think we have a couple more questions. So I'll throw another one at you. This comes from, let me see. Jessica, there we go. How would you recommend sourcing users for content testing when you don't have a tool that sources people or a user researcher available at your organization? So like how to source users for content testing. Do you have any tips there?
Yeah, it's it depends on your goals. And we also don't, I mean, we have to establish some practices and some stuff to actually be able to do stuff like that. But I think what again depends on the setup, like on your company, on the team setup and stuff like that. But I think like, even I know there is like, you need a certain number of people and stuff like that. But if you don't have like anything, anything of that, like you could just really like talk to your sales team and try to, I don't know, try to get at least into maybe one conversation, like with one customer, like, the chances are that you will find at least one person and like, take it from there. And because sometimes it's like, sometimes it's gonna be like really hard, and also like to actually understand, okay, what people do we actually need to get, like, if you use like external tools, because there are also a lot of, external tools out there. And sometimes it's just like, I also just, set up accounts and try things out, because I know like if I don't do it myself, no one's gonna like come to me like, oh, do you want to, try it out? Like, no, I think you just need to find out the ways. There are tools where you can, for example, also say, okay, we are looking for specific users, and stuff like that, and they can, get you those people to do those testings. You just need to be very careful about like, who you are. Like you have to be like the briefing, like, about what people you want to do, this interviews with or test or surveys or whatever. You need to be very, very, yeah. But again, it depends.
So maybe, okay, yeah, I like that answer. Like go for your goals and see from there, like who fits those goals maybe.
Yeah, and I think what's also maybe something, to keep in mind is that sometimes like you feel like, okay, but what do I do, like, with this one customer? But like, sometimes it's like you just need to start somewhere, and then you need to share the, the insights you get with the right people, because then when they're like, hey, but this thing is, has been happening like for I don't know how long, and then you're like, yeah, but maybe we should, that's why we should, because I know it's only one customer, but you still can get like very helpful insights, and maybe people are like, oh, okay, so we need to do something, and maybe that is the first step, right?
Point. Absolutely. All right, we have one last question, and I think after that we'll end this session today. This question is from Dominic. question is, how can we ensure that content recommendations from the business development team, who might not directly represent our users, are balanced with maintaining a user-centric approach? So that typical, business versus user needs struggle. And additionally, on top of this question, how do we address situations where the product owner, for example, supports content changes based on these business recommendations rather than the users, the ambassadors, the recommendation?
I think in some situations, literally you cannot do anything about that. Like, to be very honest, it's, also my experience from my previous work. Very often there is a you just have to, to compromise. It's not because still, there are people who have the say, and it's just sometimes there is no way around it. You can still advocate for that, and you can try to show as much data, as you have and stuff like that. But if the end of the day, if there is someone decides something, it's the same with legal teams. For me, it's the same, because then you have to do something, and then the legal team, because they are used to write things in a certain way, they're like, no, this is the way how it supposed to do. And maybe it's really hard. I think it's just we need to find the way we can do our best to advocate and show why we should not do that. But if the end of the day someone else is just deciding, there is not much you can do about that. And I also think maybe someone people from Switzerland saw this use case, this case study about how, I think it was a Raiffeisen app, they wrote this amazing case study about how they actually rewrote the FAQs based on the terms and conditions, I think, in a way that it's understandable for for someone who is not a legal person. And I think sometimes just also showing stuff like that, other examples, it might help actually people to open their eyes and understand, I know you have an opinion, I know you have a say, but we just should not do that.
Yeah, so convince with examples. Yeah, I like that. Well, cool. I think that kind of concludes the official part of our meetup today. That was the last question for today. If anyone has any more questions, I'm sure Jevgenija is happy to connect on LinkedIn, I would assume, or elsewhere. So feel free to reach out to us or to her anytime. And otherwise, I think the only thing left to say is thank you so much for being here. Thank you, all of you. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time. By the way, we already do have a date for next time. It's in September this time, so we're not doing bi-monthly, but we're doing next month. It's the 21st of September. That's a Thursday. And it's going to be about overcoming the challenges of joining a new company in a senior content design role. So it'll be more from a perspective of, someone who's been in the content design industry for a while.